Hey, everybody. We're excited to have you join us for this newest episode of the Orchestration Kitchen here at Strata. Today, we're going to dig into a really saucy topic, and that topic is how do you manage identities when you're going through a merger, an acquisition, or even a divestiture? And things can get really kind of thorny and mixed up as you think about this. And it's going to be a very interesting topic for us to dig into today. I'm your host today. My name's Chef Mark. I'm with the product marketing team here at Strata. And as always, I'm joined by Chef Terry of our solutions engineering team. Today's format, as we do with most orchestration kitchens, is going to follow a typical flow. We're going to go through a little bit about what identity orchestration is at a glance, because it's important for us to set that baseline understanding of what the technology is that we're talking about as we get into the cooking with this example. And so once we do that, we're going to get into some whiteboard examples. And just like any good cooking show, you want to see what the recipe cards look like and take a look at some of the ingredients that you're going to be working with. And then Chef Terry, you're going to take us actually into the kitchen and we're going to cook live with an example today. Is that right?
Absolutely. Can't wait to
Awesome.
show everybody the power of what we brought for you today.
Spectacular. Well, we have Q&A throughout, and we'll answer those questions at the end. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into what identity orchestration is. So again, we can set the foundation for the style of cooking that we're going to be doing today. Chef Terry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Identity orchestration really is a unique way to solve identity-related challenges. And simply put, it allows you to protect applications, be those new modern applications or older legacy ones, in a really powerful and meaningful way. And how we do that is we abstract out all of the common different things that happen in a user journey. So these things could be authentication, access control, MFA, all the way down the entire user journey to where you know you've got the right user at the right time. They've proven who they are. But we have a lot of flexibility and power because of the orchestration that we built. We can have multiples of all of these things. So in a merger and acquisition setting, it's all well and good to authenticate one way or another, but you just bought a company that does it differently. Maybe they have a different vendor. Maybe they use different technology. All of those things are really super common in terms of merger and acquisition. So orchestration allows you to have multiple different ways to authenticate, but you're still getting access to the same application. All of that happens just without the end users ever knowing that identity orchestration is what is doing all the magic here. So the idea there is that we can protect the application to the last millimeter of its existence. So in many cases, the application doesn't know that anything around it's changed. But lo and behold, you can authenticate to Okta and to Entra and to something else if that's interesting to you. Because in a merger and acquisition thing, maybe I'm John at newco, or maybe I'm Sally at oldco, and we each authenticate and prove who we are in very different ways, but you still have to get to the HR system. You still have to get to benefits. You still have to get to all those critical systems. Identity orchestration is a really simple and elegant way to do those things without making major changes into your environment.
And that's, I think, the critical thing that you just called out there is that no major changes to your environment. I see in small type on the right side here about the apps. So we're actually going to do all this without refactoring the applications. The apps aren't going to be any wiser that something's changed.
That's exactly right. Yeah, in a traditional world, if we're talking about a modern application, the application gets tightly coupled to its identity provider, which isn't a bad thing to do, but it gets problematic in a merger and acquisition scenario because now if my primary way to authenticate is Entra, what happens if I buy somebody with Okta? Well, I've got a problem. With orchestration, you can have multiples of those. So the orchestrator protects the application. The application just trusts the orchestrator implicitly. And then the orchestrator can say, I have two different ways, three different ways, five different ways to prove that a user is who they say they are before I let them into the application.
That's great. Well, and as you think about this, in our previous episodes of the kitchen, we've talked in the past about onboarding applications from or modernizing from a legacy provider to a modern one. And we talked about scale. And that's the thing that people really need to think about as you are looking at a merger, acquisition, or divestiture. We talk about, organizations that have 300, 400, or 1,000 applications. They have two, three, four different types of user groups. They may have a couple different IDPs. But that's one organization that has eventually figured out its stuff. What we're talking about is the scale problem here is bring in a whole net new group of those applications, IDPs, user types, and authentication patterns, and make the two work together in happy harmony. You know,
That's exactly right. And mergers and acquisitions are also unique in that it's not driven by planned process. You get notified from the board or whomever makes the decision to acquire another company or merge with them. And then there's this arbitrary deadline that you've got to get everything working in a really compressed amount of time. Well, orchestration makes that easy. You don't have to do all those forklift upgrades where you remove things from the new company and move them into the old company, or however that works for your organization. You can allow them to coexist for whatever time makes the sense so that you can get everyone the right level of access, and then at a more thoughtful and pronounced pace you can make the changes that are necessary to turn off those things that you no longer need and invest in the things that are necessary.
this one's actually really near and dear to my heart, Chef Terry. I'm actually going to share a personal anecdote here. Is that I actually went through an acquisition from a smaller organization into a very large multinational company. And due to the security concerns at the larger organization, there wasn't a seamless way to integrate those of us coming from this old company into the new company. And instead of being able to set up a scenario where I could do all this work and have two different identities that work in this space, I actually got issued two different laptops. And for 6 months, I was working on two different laptops with two different environments, but I was working with the same team members. And so at times, I was even having to play a game of telephone between a Teams environment on one side and Google Meet and Hangout on the other so that the teams could talk. And this is not uncommon. This is something we see all the time with mergers and acquisitions.
Absolutely right, and it's happening more and more, especially in acquisitive industries. You just see the momentum, and it continues to go on and on and on.
That's it. I mean, we think about financial services, we think about healthcare, we think about retail. All of these organizations have grown through acquisitions over time. And those largest, Fortune 500, Fortune 10 organizations didn't just spring up overnight in just one entity. They came through with lots and lots of other organizations that they've acquired or merged with over time. And again, we're not leaving off divestitures. There may be a point in time where an organization looks to sell off a business unit or a group. And how do you cleanly do that? And things just get really, difficult here. And you mentioned the board. You wake up one morning and you hear, how quickly can you get people pushed through? I think a key indicator in all of this is the time to value of that transaction. The board members, the shareholders are demanding the fastest time to value for this transaction. They're investing an incredible amount of time here. But if it takes you 3 months to be able to figure out how to cleanly get into the HR system or get into those resources you need at the new co, that's loss of efficiency, that's loss of productivity, and that's loss of time to value.
That's exactly right. And the person who gets grumpy about it is the board themselves, and those are the people you tend not to want to make grumpy.
I agree. And you know what else happens in mergers and acquisitions is you look at the individuals in the old co or new co who find creative workarounds. If you have to get into the HR system because you need to get your payroll or you need to update your health insurance information at the new organization, and for whatever reason the system isn't responding in time, they're sharing a password. There's very insecure things that start happening because people are really seriously concerned about themselves. And so, really identities are hard enough as it is in a single organization. But now what we're talking about is bringing those disparate environments together into a single newco. So, maybe we can whiteboard or you can walk us through some examples of what we'd be looking at here as we talk about mergers and acquisitions and identity.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the end result. This is what I'm going to demonstrate for us at the end of the cooking show. But the idea here is in the upper right, we've got an application that we want to protect. This could be your HR application. This could be an industry specific one. This is where you keep your intellectual property. It really doesn't matter from our perspective. We can protect all of them. And so simply put, in one way, shape, or form, the Mavericks orchestrator is going to sit along that user journey. So as you try to get access to the application itself, you're just going to be presented with, in this case, we just decided we we're going to create a web page and say, give us your email address, and we'll route based on that. Now, it's important to understand that is the only way to do that. That's just a simple way to do that, and it's easy for demos. You can also just automatically say that, look, if you're coming from the network of newco, we're just going to send you to newco. If you're coming from a different region of the world, we're just going to send you to the place that's appropriate for that. So any of the information that we can glean from that traffic, we can automatically use for routing decisions. But for demonstration purposes, we just ask. But the end result here is that the orchestrator itself has powerful configuration in it. It has multiple different ways we can authenticate into any given application. In this case, I picked on Entra ID and Okta. Is that because they're very different technologies, very competitive companies, but they all do similar things. They authenticate users and determine if they are indeed who they say they are. But then ultimately, they get to the application, new or old, we don't really care. And then we're going to be the arbiter whether or not they allow you to do that. We don't care that you came in from Okta or Entra. As long as they tell us that you are who you say you are, we're going to believe them. So let's show how we actually get that done in our orchestration fabric. So the first step is to add the application itself. So here we'll create a definition of what is the application that I'm protecting. Is this Workday? Is this Salesforce? Is this a legacy application that's been around but serving the business needs for a long time? You just tell the orchestrator what type of application am I protecting, and then we create whatever is necessary for the application to know that it's got an authenticated authorized user. In this case, we already had Entra in there. So in my demo scenario here, the oldco, the existing company, is already integrated with Entra. So we already have an integration with Entra already modeled out for us here, and it's already defined into the orchestration fabric. So then it's just a matter of adding in the secondary one. So the idea here is that we still keep the same infrastructure, the same configuration, or largely the same configuration, I should be more clear, and say, in addition to you going to Entra, under some circumstances, I want you to go to Okta. So we can then get the user to give us important information, and then we can make programmatic decisions to say, under these conditions, I go here, under these conditions, I go to Okta, but you always go to the same application without any interference or change in the user experience beyond putting in your email address. So we try to make it as simple, as clean, and as elegant as we possibly can so that your users don't get alarmed that things are changing even in very dynamic worlds like mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures.
I love this. And as I think through this, as we think through, let's just stick with an acquisition scenario, just because it makes it easy for, the purpose of the thought here is that the resources at newco are important to those the users at oldco who are coming into the organization. The traditional HR, email, all the things that they would need to do their job, like within the first hour of the acquisition. But there's also the other direction of there's a reason that this company was acquired, and they have resources and applications and things that newco employees and users need access into as well. So this is protecting applications on both sides and providing common access across those.
That's exactly right. And that can go, in multiple ways, in multiple at times, depending on kind of the ecosystem of that life cycle change. So we can meet you at every step of that. You can have both organizations going to both sets of applications, a subset all going to the same application, or whatever you need or want. We're designed to be flexible that way.
That's great. And I think this also helps, I think with something just like the human element of mergers and acquisitions, where between my personal experience of being in an acquired organization, I was Mark at oldco, but then I'm Mark at newco, and it's which set of credentials am I in which scenario? And at what point do you turn off Mark at oldco, or do you leave that going and you have these zombie accounts? And there's this just namespace and issues that come up during mergers and acquisitions that people are going so quickly through that they don't think about until, due diligence is all the financial metrics that make the deal make sense. But what about the IT side of things here? And what about the identities? That's the thing that's often overlooked.
You're exactly right. And at the end of the day, even in these, really chaotic, dynamic circumstances, you're still who you are. I'm still Terry Kozar, regardless of what technology it says about me or what email address I might be using to log in. I am still the identity in this circumstance. But when you do all those really awkward things where under one condition I'm T Kozar, at other conditions I'm Terry.Kozar, and I've got to manage those things, it really creates awkward experiences, insecure environments, and just a pain in the backside for your users. So we believe we've got a much more elegant way to do that with far less effort, and we can do it very, very quickly for you.
I love it. Well, without further ado, maybe you could take us a little bit through cooking. We've seen the recipe, we've seen the ingredients that we're going to be working with today. Maybe give us a little flavor for what's cooking in the kitchen.
Let's do it. So what I have here is I've actually got we're trying to get to an application. For demonstration purposes, I'm using an old application because it's a little more fun than just the modern stuff that anybody can integrate with. So here we're just putting up a web page that just puts them in there. It's just HTML. You can make it look however you want. This is just what I decided that I wanted to do. And so I've got a new user, and they're a part of the company that just got acquired. They're newco. And so this newco employee, John at newco.com, wants to go into the application. So all well and good. So he's going to go off to there. He just puts his email address, and we automatically know that based on newco employee, we're going to go ahead and have them go to Okta, and then they're going to go ahead and log in. And lo and behold, you get to the application. Very exciting and dynamic capabilities there. Now I'm going to show you the exact same thing for an existing employee. I'll just go and create a new browser here. We're going to go to that same login page, but this I'm going to go in as Sally at oldco. Now, Sally, she's always logged into Entra. She doesn't even have an account in Okta. It wouldn't even make sense to send her there. So we send her to the right place for the right job. So we allow her to get in from her native capability, log in just as she always does, and then we're into the application. It's just that simple because the identity fabric protects the application, and then we can route to as many places to authenticate, as many places to do MFA, as many places as you need for any of the identity related services trivially.
That's great, because this application here that we're looking at, this Sonar Systems HR management screen, nothing got changed here. In fact, we probably didn't have the opportunity to change this because maybe the source code's too old. We just did all those things. But this is the beauty of identity orchestration. What you just showed is not HTML trickery. Oh, I put something in this field and it just takes me to a different page. There was actually identity logic behind the scenes that was routing and checking and making sure those authentication requests were appropriate.
Absolutely. And the logic that we use for that is really up to our customers. The way that I built it for demo is pretty easy. Your new co or your old co, and we can make that decision easily. But if you want to do exotic things, let's say if you're a new co employee coming from the different part of the world, I do different steps. I go through more security steps. I do ID proofing, whatever it may be. That's fully in the reach of our customers because that's what identity orchestration is there to solve for.
I love that. And as I'm thinking out loud about this, it's not only do we put in some additional controls, as you were just describing, if somebody's coming from a different region or a different area or different conditions. It sounds like, and I can probably speak from experience, and I think you've been through acquisitions as well, is that there's a lot of demand on the new co's IT organization to manage identities, which means there's probably a fair amount of risk involved as well as they're starting to think about when do I get rid of market old co and turn off some of the old identities? There's a chance of things actually breaking along the lines. A little bit of a shameless plug here. It sounds like a place for always on and always available identity as a need as well.
I couldn't agree with that more. Yeah, there's nothing but risk when you're making those kinds of decisions because any miscalculation, any mistiming of a step, and people aren't able to do their jobs. People aren't able to transact business with your organization. People aren't able to do the things that are critical for every business to function.
There it is. And so, we've got identity continuity as a solution to de-risk that. We have the concurrent IDPs that you have here. So what we just walked through, the organization newco could take their time then to merge Sally and her team into this application, into Okta, I should say, if they ever choose to. There may be actually a business case for them to maintain the discrete and separate IDPs.
Absolutely. And we've got customers that have done both, that they say, look, we want to turn off Okta over time, but I want to have a little breathing room. That's one valid use case. So they do this IDP picker kind of an approach for 4 months, 6 months, whatever that looks like. And then we have other people that says they're always going to be autonomous business units, but they still share some systems like benefits and HR and those kinds of things. So there's still always going to be different ways to authenticate, but we do share some systems in the overall mothership, as it were.
That's right. That's right. And then in a divestiture scenario, you may maintain them in the common IDP that they had at the original co as they get spun off into a new business unit. There may be a reason to adopt another IDP, but in doing so, you're able to seamlessly make this all happen. And I think the most critical thing that we are sharing here is that the time to value for that transaction, the teams haven't lost any of their efficiency. They're able to get the resources they need the minute after that deal is announced on the wire, the minute after this hits the market and people know that the acquisition or the divestiture has happened, they're still getting their business done. They're not waiting weeks or months to get access to key resources.
That's exactly right. So we believe this is a really interesting and compelling need for organizations that are acquisitive or spin-off companies in any regularity, because we are the easy button for those kinds of things. We can do it whenever you want, however you want, in a way that doesn't impact your application owners at all. And so it really is a very powerful paradigm.
I love it. Well, I think my financial services friends, those private equity folks who might be out there listening, hopefully you're paying attention. It sounds like in addition to due diligence, as you're looking at the financials, think about the IT side of this. You've got to think about identity and the challenges you face during mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. And it sounds like a key ingredient in any M&A transaction going forward really should be identity orchestration. It's got some incredibly powerful things to help that time to value be as immediate as possible and make sure the board, that the employees, that the shareholders are getting the value they need as quickly as they need it. So, Chef Terry, thank you so much for joining us today in the kitchen, and our audience, thank you so much for joining us as well. As always, please take a look at the Orchestration Kitchen Hub, as you can see here. If you want to see any of our replays from our previous kitchen episodes or see what's next and around the corner. And Chef Terry, how about if they have questions specifically around mergers and acquisitions? Who can they talk with?
Absolutely. You can either reach out to sales@strata.io or to me personally, Terry@strata.io. We'll get you an answer to the questions that you have. We'll spin up a demo. We'll have a conversation so that we can make sure that you have all the information that you need to make a healthy decision for your organization.
Another delicious episode. I appreciate you, Chef Terry. It was a pleasure, and we hope to see everybody on our next episode. Thanks for joining us.